Hello everyone, this is the cluster API project office hour. Today is May 26, 2022. And before starting, just a few notes. This is a project, and this is the CNCF project. So please be nice with each other. We abide to do the CNCF code of conduct. If you want to speak or to have topic, please add your topic to the agenda in order to access the agenda document. You have to be part of the SIG Lifecycle mailing list. Let me pass the doc in the chat. And so let's go to the agenda. So first of all, let's start to welcome new attendees. So if there is someone which is new of this group, feel free to speak up. I stop for a moment. Okay, it seems that there are no new attendees today, so let's jump quickly to open proposal readout. So I think that a couple of proposals merged recently. So machine pool machine, if I'm right, is already merged. Matt, could you confirm?
I haven't looked. It had a do not merge tag that needed to be removed. Otherwise, yes. Let me go check.
I think you can merge it now. Still just kept it open for, let's wait another day. Yes, since yesterday, so.
Yeah, it's ready to go.
Okay, well, what to do? Pro hold until end of day. In case, okay, I think that we can let it go. So hold cancel and yay. So great job. Looking forward to see this work moving forward. So is it fine if I remove the machine pool proposal from here?
Yes.
Okay, congratulations. So
thank you so much. Thanks everybody for all your help.
Okay, so Stefan, if I'm right, this one merged beginning this week. Oh,
yes. Yep. You merged it.
Okay, Alberto, please speak up.
Hey, Fabrizio, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the proposals for propagating the labels, if that's okay.
Okay, as you prefer, you can talk now or we can finish to update the list before.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I can talk about it later.
So, okay, runtime, cluster pair runtime hooks was in merge queue before this meeting. Okay, it's merged as well. So, congrats to the team. Okay, so we have still a couple of proposals open. I think that the one, as far as I know, this one is being worked. Jonathan please speak, give an update.
Yeah. So I've been working on this with Jack for the past couple of weeks, and we're making a lot of progress on a prototype. We've been working on adding a method to maintain an inventory of the Helm charts we've installed, and we're gonna make some changes to the proposal soon. So please read it over and give us some comments.
Great, thank you for the work. We are looking forward for a demo in this venue to the broader community. We had a demo a couple of weeks ago, but I think that is now time to everyone. Cecile.
Yeah, I have a question maybe for you, Fabrizio. For proposals like this, which do not involve merging code into cluster API, but are still like part of the CAPI ecosystem, what would be the next step for like the proposal to get consensus once we have like a working prototype? Are we hoping to get that proposal merged as a PR into CAPI, or would that be like in its own repo maybe? What's the thinking there?
That's a good point. I think that in this phase, it is fine to have a PR here. And long term, I personally, given that is a project related to CAPI API, I don't mind having the proposal here. But eventually, if the project, let me say, grows by its own path, we can reconsider and have a separate set of proposals. So at this stage, I'm happy where we are. We can figure it out while the project grows. This is my idea. I don't know. Jack, do you have opinion?
Yeah, I largely agree with that. The way that I've been thinking about it is that the proposal will go through the normal flow. So eventually it would be agreed upon in the Google Doc and then matriculate to a PR in CAPI. But what we're sort of trying to prove out is by making a prototype in an external project in parallel, we can make progress and have the proposal not block actual functional progress to prove out some of our hypotheses. And the proposal becomes a sort of acceptance gate for integrating that prototype into actually CAPI. So it allows us to kind of do both things at once. Hopefully that makes sense, that explanation.
In my opinion, it makes sense at least to keep all the options open at this stage. Sooner or later, let me say, we are adding more and more things to the CAPI report. I'm fine with it because we always had this idea of battery included. But yeah, the report is growing. So for now, fine. Maybe sometime in the future, we will have to discuss about balance and different options, but I'm good for now. So, okay. If we can move on, so we have managed Kubernetes. I know this proposal is waiting for answer. And I will try to give a look now that KubeCon is concluded and I'm back to normal. Okay. Label sync. This proposal needs some love from the community. I remember someone updated a couple of weeks ago, and we have to help making progress. Roberto?
Yeah, thanks, Fabrizio. That's the one that I was talking about before. I was looking at it today. It's been hanging there for a while. I was hoping we can revise the effort and materialize it. The proposal looks okay to me as it is now. I think Stefan had dropped some comment earlier, but mainly about making sure that we agree on the scope. So yeah, I was wondering how we could proceed here. If we could maybe start lazy consensus, or do you guys think that we need more time to keep discussing there? Maybe Stefan, you have some opinions.
Yep. So for me, it's only the two things that I wrote there. We got some feedback from Vince. So I would say something like, if Fabrizio maybe can also take a look at least at those 2 points. And I think we just have to make a decision there. I mean, the 2 points in my opinion are the one thing is, where do we actually put the labels inside the map you already have and just treat some of them differently or have a separate field? I think we don't have strong objections. Not sure if you have a tendency or not. And the other thing is just, should we, as part of that proposal, only implement it for machines of machine deployments, or should we try to implement it for machine deployments and KCP? I think that would be better because then we don't have to introduce some hack into the machine controller to differentiate between KCP and machine deployments, but just my opinions. I think overall, if you have some people here, we should be able to get consensus maybe now or very soon, and then move forward.
Linda?
Thank you. Thank you. I got a bunch of reviews on this today. My only comment would be that incorporating it into KCP, actually 2 comments. So incorporating it into KCP is not an issue. I definitely can update the proposal to incorporate that. I think the other one is maybe the bigger question, and I think we keep going back and forth on it. That is introducing a new field versus just overloading, or just using the labels as they are, but having some exception in terms of how they're handled. If we can just reach some consensus on that, that would be great. I think that's the only real sticking point. I think the tendency is to lean towards introducing a new field, and that's totally fine with me. I just want to make sure everybody else feels the same way on that topic. Besides that, I think the proposal in itself we've addressed all the other points.
So thank you for this note. Personally, I would like a couple of days to take a look, and if it is okay for I will take this week, and next week we set the lazy consensus for everyone. And I will ask also Beans to make a pass if possible. Cecile, your opinion?
Sorry, I wasn't following.
I was just asking if it is possible to have another week to look at the document, and then we can start a lazy consensus from next week. For
the label sync?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that sounds fine. I think in general, maybe we should have a bit more of a criteria for when a proposal can go into lazy consensus. It feels like we have to decide it every time. Maybe like once it's received 2 LGTMs from reviewers, then we can move it forward or something like that, to make sure proposals get enough reviews, but also aren't blocked eternally waiting for reviews.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me say, and one thing that I want to do now is that I want to go back to the discussion about the release cadence, and possibly when we talk about the release cadence, I want kick off 2 other discussion. One is proposal life cycle. If we try to have proposal merged at the beginning of each cycle, so it's like giving reviewers a focused time to look at the proposal, and then we have a implementation window and so on and so forth. So maybe this is more manageable. And second one is release management, because probably this is probably better to talk later when maybe Stefan gives us an update on 124. Okay, so as far as I know, other proposal like external TCD, load balancer, spotting instances are there are no recent activity. So unless someone wants to add something about the proposal, we can move on with the agenda. Okay, so let's see what we have for discussion topic. So PSA, I don't know who added, but I can read it. So KubeCon was the response from the community and the interest for the cluster API project at KubeCon was amazing, totally unexpected, and we are super happy. Vince made a great recap in this tweet. Please take a look. There are interesting talks. We made the main stage basically every day with different manager, all from our users. And during the conference, Vince Yuvaragi basically updated the slide of the cluster API deep dive to reflect all the feedback. And I think that, yeah, the most important quote is that our users are our best asset. And I like this sentence. So thank you for our users. And yeah, let's keep going. Moving on. Jacob. Is Jacob here? I don't see the
He was
participant.
talking, but we can't hear him.
Does it work
Oh.
now? Maybe.
Yes.
Ah, perfect. Okay, just some glitch apparently. Yes. So I started at KubeCon in our spontaneous meetup with another attempt at removing Core v1 object reference, and I've now created a new issue about that because the other one, first of all, has a lot of history of just bot commands and so on, and now also got renamed to a different topic. So I would like to try again. And I've summarized a few aspects of what was discussed, at least a little bit at KubeCon, and I've made proposals for the types we could potentially add. It's quite long, maybe even long enough to be a proper proposal, but I just wrote it as an issue for now. We can convert it. Yes, it's probably, I don't know if we want to discuss it in here. It's probably too long and people also need to look at it before we can actually discuss. So maybe just take a look. The most important thing from my perspective, because that was the blocking thing before, and I think is still the blocking thing, is that this is basically a breaking change. I would argue that it's not, that it's still fine to do it because the impact is not that great, but we need to decide how we want to handle API versioning. Because if you strictly follow the API guidelines of Kubernetes, you technically aren't allowed, at least the way I interpret them, to change anything or to really change anything in better API versions. So from my perspective, if you strictly follow the guidelines, it doesn't even make sense to have V1 beta 2 because you can't have any breaking changes between beta versions. So I think, and there is a separate comment about that versioning problem at the bottom. I think that's the most important thing to decide. And my idea or my suggestion would be to not strictly follow it, but to still allow changes in beta versions, but just use the status or the beta status of the API to specify how long it will be supported. So if it's a beta API, there's longer backwards compatibility than if it's a alpha API, and if it's a V1, then we basically want to support it for a very long time. So maybe that makes more sense because otherwise there is no real reason to even move to V1 beta 2 from my point of view. Maybe I'm wrong, or maybe the opinion about the API conventions is different already. But yeah, and then there's another decision we can make when we actually decide to implement this, and that would be to drop the version field on all references because we technically don't need them for most cases. I think Stefan mentioned some special handling in some cases where we actually, or where the controllers actually upgrade or update the versions. There's also some arguments for dropping the version fields, which also involves Git ops, for example, because there it's difficult if the controller or if some mutating webhook changes fields that were previously set through GitOps, that doesn't really work. So since that's one of the goals in the future, that would also be an argument. But it's all written in there, and there's a second comment about that version problem. The best thing might be just reading this and then providing some feedback.
Someone want to comment? Stefan?
Just a high-level comment. I would generally like to see this happen. It's just a question of when and how. But essentially what we're currently using is object reference from upstream, which has a bunch of weird fields that we're not using. And there's even a comment there that this type shouldn't be used. So I would really like to fix this before we go to V1 at some point. But yeah, there are a lot of details and we have to discuss a lot of them first. So I'll read it first and then answer on the issue.
Maybe we can also then have a longer or more detailed discussion in the next meeting once everyone had a chance to look at it, because I only opened it yesterday evening, I think.
So one comment from me. I think that cleaning up the fields that we know are there and that are used is a nice change. I'm a little bit less conservative about changing API version in, so let me say, changing the current field that we use. But it is, I think this is a good discussion and makes sense to have as soon as possible. So thank you for opening the issue. I don't expect this to be worked soon because this will basically go when we bump the next beta release. We don't have plan to do this soon, but it is a good discussion to have. Someone else has opinion about this issue?
Maybe some small thing to add. So one of the reasons I would like to have this discussion now is my idea would be to actually add those types already to the current API, but not use them or not replace existing ones, at least if we agree to replace V1 object reference, so that we can use those new reference types with new APIs that get added. Because, I mean, it's then even more inconsistent within the API if we use in one API both more specific references and the generic object reference ones. But if we plan to change it anyway, then it doesn't really make sense to add the old reference type to new types. So I'm mostly coming, or I mostly want to have it because of the IPAM implementation, because there are need references and I don't really want to do object references because it just makes it more complicated and requires then validation and defaulting webhooks that I otherwise wouldn't need, I think, at least in some cases. So
Alberto?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks again, Jacob, for bringing this up. I'm curious if is this causing any trouble for you as an API user, or you're looking into this just because of like from a correctness point of view?
So for me personally, it doesn't cause any trouble because I know about it, but there's a lot of unused fields. So in general core, V1 object reference is not really intended to be used anymore. There's even a warning as a comment that it's discouraged to use it because there's a lot of fields that are usually not used by implementations. So for example, there's, I think, object path or something if you want to reference only a subsection of an object with which probably nobody implements. Then there is UID, which is rarely used, only in status usually, and a few more. And for users, it's actually very inconvenient because you don't know which fields are in use and which aren't. So you can technically set them and the API server will accept them, but they don't serve any function. And for some things like namespace, for example, it even requires custom validation logic, and you're only allowed to set it to the same namespace as the object containing that reference because of some sensible security or, I don't know, just application restrictions. And if you just remove the namespace field, it's first and foremost more clear that you can't choose the namespace and therefore only reference things in the same namespace. and at the same time, you can remove validation logic and defaulting logic that you don't really need. And I think when I implemented, so I just tried implementing this 2 times already. I think once for Alpha 3 and then once for Alpha 4. And I think the first time I even found one instance in the code where it wasn't properly validated, the namespace, or the validation for the namespace was missing and the field was just ignored. So you could even set it to a different namespace, but it didn't have any effect. And that's just from a user experience, not that ideal. That's also one of the reasons that they discourage using the object. And then the second thing, which is dropping the version field, that's actually from mostly from a GitOps perspective, because it's something that if you upgrade the version of manifests in your Git repository, or in general, the referenced version can change. And in general, also with conversion webhooks, it's probably difficult if you set it through a validation webhook, or you need to automatically through a conversion webhook, or you need to convert the version of the referenced object in the webhook as well. And it makes it difficult to properly upgrade manifests. So if you have 2 manifests in Git that both belong to cluster API, for example, I don't know, cluster and machine deployment, and machine deployment references cluster, and you want to upgrade the manifests, you also need to make sure to upgrade the reference version, or the version in the reference, and you need to do it at the same time. So it's difficult to upgrade the manifest just for the cluster, for example. And yeah, in general, technically it probably doesn't really matter. But then the client would still fetch an old version in some cases maybe, or usually the version field also just gets ignored. So it's just, you don't need it, and it's getting in the way sometimes.
If I'm right, Yassine first and then Daniel.
Maybe Daniel, if you want to respond to this, you can go first.
Sure, I was just actually, it just reminded me of a PR that I opened a little while back. I realized that the namespace wasn't being defaulted for the infra and bootstrap references, and that isn't a problem, you know, unless you start to actually work with you know, if you're processing those resources in some way, you're looking at the references, and if the namespace is missing, you know, sometimes that can cause a problem that you know, you basically have to say, okay, like the namespace may be something that we don't actually care about if the default's not there, etc. But at the end of that conversation on the PR, you know, the conclusion was, hey, you know, if we don't have object references, we wouldn't have this problem. So just as an example, that's all. So
I started taking a look at the issue, and I think, like, in general, I think it's desirable to move away from object reference. I think even Jason at the time opened a long time issue to move away from that. The only thing that I want to be cautious about is probably using whatever API machinery exposes in terms of types and APIs. And the second thing is probably, like, if you want to do this in V1 beta 2, yeah, as long as we're able to convert the existing types and like have conversion webhooks that work through those, then that should be fine, I guess. This is my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Jacob, for raising the point. It seems that it is really interesting. I will go through. I understand that the problem that we have an additional field that just create annoyance and bad UX. I will investigate a little better the GitOps part of the problem. but yeah, thank you for raising this. So let's move to the next point, Jonathan.
Yeah, so I wanted to give an update on the Cluster API Visualizer app I've been working on. And as a reminder, this is a web app that provides a UI for viewing your multi-cluster setup and your Cluster API resources. And it makes it easier for users and developers to see their clusters at a glance. I demoed a proof of concept a while back, but since then I've reworked it to import Cappy as a library and use the cluster.ctl client, and also to show the status of the resources. So I've also set up a Helm chart and a repo for this, and I'm working on integrating it with a Cappy tilt. So in the meantime, check out the repo if you're interested and try it out, and hopefully I'll have a demo ready soon. I also put a link to the repo in the notes.
Thanks, Jonathan. This is a great improvement for Cappy UX. So if there are no comments, Stefan.
Yep, just added a link. Just had an update. So we're currently trying to use Kubernetes 1.24 in CapD, and we had an issue there, but it's very, very CapD specific in my opinion. So essentially our problem is that because of some more context. So kubeadm started defaulting to the systemd C group driver with 1.21, I think, plus minus one version. Kind started to use systemd C group driver with 1.24. The result is essentially that in CapD, we have to use C group FS, a C group driver for Kubernetes 1.23 or lower, and we have to use systemd for 1.24 or higher. So essentially, we end up in a situation where we have to use a specific C group driver depending on the Kubernetes version. We did a few iterations and we have PR open, which now works. So essentially, we got it to work to deploy 1.24 clusters, to be able to upgrade from 1.23 to 1.24. Most of the PR is just some changes in our test framework, or let's say in our test YAML files for CapD, a few small changes to test framework, but they will only affect CapD. The only user-facing change that is currently on this PR, let's say the only two, is one is that we're using 1.24 in our quick start. And the second one is that we would only expose a cluster class-based cluster template for use of CapD, which essentially means if you use the quick start, if you go through CapD, you have to set the cluster topology feature flag. And then you can use the only template that we have, which is cluster class based. The alternative to that would be to provide a second one, which is not using cluster class, but we have to add a bunch of disclaimers like you can't use the template with 1.23 or below. You can't use the template for upgrades, or you can have to modify manual stuff. So current status, we would only provide a cluster class based template. I think now would be a good time for objections. But TLDR is essentially, we have it working. And when the PR is merged, we have it on main. Yeah, probably does it summarize everything, Fabrizio? I think those are the main points. If you're interested, take a look at the PR.
Yeah, TLDR is that we managed to get end-to-end working, and for CapD, we are moving to a single template deployed, which is based on cluster class, because this is the only way we can manage the change of secure drivers during upgrade. So, yeah.
I forgot two important parts. One, we had to bump the kind version to 0.14 because strictly only 0.13 and upwards supports 1.24. And there's one small fix in 0.14 for ARM or something. So we just jumped two versions. And the other thing is our machine pool coverage doesn't change. So while we changed a lot of our tests to cluster class, and cluster class technically doesn't support machine pools, we are just deploying an additional machine pool to our cluster class managed cluster in our end-to-end tests. So we still have the same coverage as before for machine pools. but that's really it. Okay.
So if there are no comments, I just want to point out things that is getting relevant for the project. So we discussed, and there is a general agreement to move the project to a stable release cadence, to be defined if 3 or 4. I will try to get the discussion moving. But and we basically discussed that for each release, we have a bunch of tasks to do, and we have to try to automate these tasks. I would like to point that also when a Kubernetes release happens, we have a couple of activities to do. And I think that as a community, we should find a better solution or a better team organization in order to make this happen timely. Because if this activity basically insists only on the same, always on the same person, things became tricky. So the idea that I would like to throw on the table, and that came, maybe we can discuss more in detail later, is that probably Cluster API needs a sort of a release team that is responsible both of bumping Cluster API itself at the given cadence, but also for making Cluster API adopt the latest Kubernetes release. This could be interesting from many points of view, because it will ensure our cadence gets respected, but also because doing this kind of activities gave to newcomers a great overview of the project. So yeah, this is an idea that I would like to throw on the table, and eventually we can discuss when we talk about release cadence. Okay, if there are no comments, we can move to provider updates. First up is CapZ. Matt.
Yeah, we had a patch release last week, just a couple of fixes you can read about right there. And then we, I don't know if this is interest to the community in general, but we still don't have reference image support because it requires writing some new code for probably uninteresting reasons. We had to change around the way things are stored within Azure. But this should land pretty soon. That's all.
Thank you, Matt. Joey, Capo CI.
Yep, nothing major, just working towards donating the code repository to the SIG. So meeting with the Lifecycle team's office hours next week, I think, to start that process and figure out what we need to do to donate the repo.
Okay, Bridget.
Hi, yeah, I put a comment in Slack, but I wanted to bring it up here too. I think that if you wanted to call it CAP OC for Oracle Cloud, that might be less ambiguous. I'm very worried about calling something OCI for Open Container Initiatives related reasons. I think it could lead people to thinking that your repo is related to something that it's not. And given that things like runC are over in the Open Containers org, that could lead to a lot of confusion. So yeah, I'm a little concerned about having CAP OCI.
I think that, Joey, if you want to say, please go.
Oh, no, I definitely open to conversation and can figure out what we would do to make that change. If everybody else has that concern, we can totally figure something out.
Yeah, is there an issue for the donation of the project in Kubernetes community or Kubernetes org already?
Sorry, is that question to me?
Yes, because maybe the right place to discuss this naming problem is that issue and not
Yes,
that.
I have an issue open in Kubernetes for the donation.
Okay, here it is.
Yep, thank you.
Bridget, do you mind to add your comment down here? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, see. Okay, it seems that we are at the end of our agenda. So is there some last minute topic to add? Seems not. So have some time back and see you next week. Bye-bye.